All right, good evening, class, and welcome to week number two. That is right, week number two of your 9407 class, which is your intellectual freedom class. As always, I'm your professor, Dr. J.S.K. Alston, and this week we are actually going to keep it a little brief. Those of you who have had me before know that I say I'm going to keep it brief a lot, and then I don't, but I seriously really am this time. And a lot of you that have had me before have also heard me say that, but this time around, yeah, because we had that really long intro video last week. We are going to balance it out by I am determined to keep this under 10 minutes this week, and of course you can speed this up, but I'm gonna keep this under 10 minutes and just kind of move along because quite frankly, again, after you had that really long check-in video last week, there's no need for me to drain your ears again this week, especially since you have the now you know what is expected of you in the course, or at least most of what's expected of you, and you do know, well, you know what's coming up, you know all of that, you know what the course is about, you know why it's designed the way it is, all of that stuff. So there's not really a whole lot for me to talk about, but I do still want to check in just because I said I would, first of all. State of the course updates, and for the state of the course update, what I'll say for the most part is people are doing fine. For those of you who are waiting to hear from me, as far as those of you who volunteer for the debate and by email and have not heard from me. So I am still waiting for some confirmation on something first before I actually finalize debate participants and send the message out to the entire class. So if you haven't heard from me about the debate and you volunteer, just know that I got your email. It's just that I'm waiting for a response from somebody, and once I get that response from that person, then I can go ahead, finalize the teams, and send a message out to the rest of the class, letting everybody know who is going to be participating in the debate. So that is that. You will hear from me soon. You will hear from me really as soon as I get the confirmation that I need. Other things that I want to bring up. So the next thing that I wanted to bring up is that the discussion boards for the first week actually looked really good. Keep up that energy. If y'all are interested, again, in disagreeing with each other a little more, that's what this class particularly is for. Again, as I sent that warning out to you all, if you are not able to actually be in the presence of opinions that differ from yours, then don't take an intellectual freedom class, okay? Sounds like common sense, but again, I had somebody the last time I taught this class say that they didn't know what to do when they saw these opinions they disagreed with. And quite frankly, we can't be in a society where people are just stoned or unable to speak when they hear something they disagree with. But we cannot exist in these bubbles of information confirmation. That seems to be what people are starting to kind of groom themselves into or condition themselves into. And so I do kind of want to break that. So yes, by all means, the disagreements that I saw in the first week were very civil. Keep that energy up. No personal attacks. Don't do anything that you wouldn't do with somebody standing right in front of you. If you don't want to get clocked in the face or anything like that, just make sure that you mind your manners, but at the same time, healthy disagreement is how we advance things in this society. I think that's lost on people in this age of social media, but that's what it is. If you want to actually grow as a person, you have to be exposed to things that you disagree with, and you have to be able to articulate why you disagree and what you feel instead. So keep all of that in mind as we take a look at the modules that we have this week. So last week, again, we had a lighter topic just to kind of introduce you to the course. This week, we are getting into our First Amendment basics and that sort of thing. And we are also talking about the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment works in tandem with the First Amendment. And so it's important to learn about them both. But the reason why I felt it was important to have this module on the First Amendment, and the reason why we actually have like 4 weeks worth of content just on the First Amendment. Well, not just on the First Amendment, but spawning from the First Amendment. And the reason why we have all this content on the First Amendment in this class is because the First Amendment is very important to how libraries and archives and museums approach intellectual freedom, okay? So when libraries are, hopefully at least, when libraries are drafting policies as far as what they will and will not allow as far as collections and as far as people using the space and speakers, invited guests, that sort of thing. Hopefully when they are actually exploring those things and actually putting together policy and things of that nature, they are taking into account the First Amendment rights of everybody. Actually, you don't even have to be an American citizen to enjoy the First Amendment rights when you are in the United States. Okay, so yes. So yes, prior to me taking over this class, there was a lot of other type of theory. It was like just theory from a long, long time ago. No, John Stuart Mill, who several of you talked about in the first discussion board. There was a lot of writing when I inherited this course on stuff from him and stuff from other people. And all of that is great, but I think that the First Amendment stuff is actually more important. I'm more of a practical professor as opposed to a theoretical professor. And so when I look at intellectual freedom needs in this current library environment, what I see is not a need to know the theory and philosophy of John Stuart Mill and all of these other people from back in the day. What I see is a need to really understand the First Amendment, and especially when it comes to, and we'll revisit this again in about 3 weeks, but when it comes to hate speech, the amount of misinformation out there that you get from librarians, ironically, about the First Amendment and whether or not it protects hate speech, it's just unbelievable. It's pathetic. Yes, the First Amendment protects hate speech. You heard me say that last week. You hear me say it now. You're going to hear me say it again in 3 weeks. But you are at some point going to run into a librarian that says that hate speech is not protected by the First Amendment, and that librarian doesn't know what they're talking about. They probably saw that on a blog and just ran with it. So, I don't want our librarians to be people who have poor information literacy. So definitely, please be aware of what the First Amendment does and does not protect speech-wise. And so right now we're just doing the basics of the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment. But next week we're going to start talking about some types of speech that are exempt from First Amendment protections, okay? And it's very important to know these sorts of things, because if something is exempt from First Amendment protections, you don't have to entertain it at all in your in your library, because it's not protected speech. And speech that is not protected can be outlawed. And so, yes, that's why, for instance, and I used this example last week, if somebody were to call me a nigger and I were to punch them, then that person used a fighting word, and fighting words are not protected speech. So I don't know about Missouri law, but in North Carolina, you can actually be charged with ethnic intimidation for calling a black man a nigger, right? So, I don't know if that's the case in Missouri. I hope it is. But I say that to say that if somebody were to call me that and I were to retaliate by physically striking them, their defense to the police can, it's not a sufficient defense to the police to say, well, I have freedom of speech. I was just exercising my freedom of speech. No. In North Carolina, it is, quite frankly, illegal to call a black person a nigger. You would be subject to ethnic intimidation charges if the cops decided they wanted to do that. All right. So, yeah, keep that in mind. You do not have to entertain any unprotected speech in your library. So what we'll be talking about next week will be the I believe the child pornography, the fighting words, and there are a couple of other things. I can just go into the module and look. So quite frankly, that's what I'm going to do. Fighting words, obscenity, true threats, and child pornography. And then we'll talk about some other unprotected speech in week number 4. But yeah, it's good to know these things, because as you're drafting or updating library policy, you can actually write into your policies that you will not allow these types of speech. And if somebody tries to challenge that, you've got the best protection in the world. You've got the fact that the United States government does not protect that speech, okay? So you would be just fine in those cases. And I feel that knowing the First Amendment, knowing these things about the First Amendment, is more important to you practically than knowing about the theory of some old dead white dudes. Okay, so I am going to leave it right there. I am Dr. Jace, and if you want to be successful, you've got to finish this race. I will see you all next week. If you have any questions, email me, austinj@missouri.edu, anyplace, anytime, anytown, and I will see you next week. Looking forward to it. Take care, y'all.